This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad and live today. It is humbling to be invited to do God's work, for we are all far from being perfect candidates. In my former congregation, I was invited by our senior pastor to pray at a fundraising luncheon that the church was hosting. Now, we were meeting with all the large givers of the church in order to see if they might be interested in supporting a $12 million building project that we hope to embark upon. Now, it was an honor to be able to kick off this important luncheon with a prayer because I would be the one that sets the tone for the entire event. Now, I knew that I didn't want to write down a prayer and just read it because that just didn't seem genuine to me. I really wanted it to come from the heart. So I kind of planned out how the prayer would go in my head. Now, the folks at this luncheon had been extremely generous to the congregation in the past, and I wanted to touch on the fact that this generous giving equals abundant living. Yeah, that's perfect, I thought. So I got up there and I began my prayer, and I came to the part where I was just going to, boom, knock it out of the park. Generous giving equals abundant living. That's all I had to say. But then something happened inside of my head. The catchphrase altered ever so slightly, and I ended up saying, "Help us to be generous givers so that we might be abundant livers." Seriously? You got to be kidding me. Livers? Yeah, that didn't work out too well. Everyone laughed. I was embarrassed, but it did lighten the mood for a great meeting that resulted in a green light for the project. It is humbling to be invited to do God's work, for we are all far from being perfect candidates. Jesus offers up the first of two parables in our gospel reading for today. He says that when you are invited to a wedding banquet, don't sit down in the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by the host. Rather, when you are invited to go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Hey, friend, move up higher." Jesus ends the parable with the following words: "For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Now, maybe I was exalting myself a little bit for being asked to say the prayer at this important luncheon. I certainly was humbled pretty quickly. My guess is we all know what it feels like to be exalted as well as humbled. It happens all the time in recreation, just ask any golfer, and it happens in work as well, as we have the week of our lives where we're riding high, only to have a deal fall through, a complication rise up, a crisis rear its head, a client run away, a program fail miserably, or even a prayer that is received with laughter. We are reminded that we are human, that we aren't perfect, that we don't have all the answers, and that we should remain humble in all that we do. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Nowhere else is this more evident when we compare ourselves with God. You know, the blemishes and the imperfections are highlighted. We aren't as great as we think we are, or as cool, or as important, or as powerful, or as influential. We become humbled when we walk with God because our flaws are exposed. Now, the safe route would be to not follow Jesus and hence not be compared to him. You know, if Jesus is out of sight and out of mind, then there is no deficiency on our part, or so we believe. It's kind of like the guy who hears a banging sound coming from his car engine while driving on a long road trip. Instead of pulling over to see what the problem might be, he just turns up the volume on the radio so he can't hear the noise. Hey, my car's running great. The banquet analogy in the first parable of our gospel is a good one because it tells us that we need to exhibit a quality of humility in all that we do. But Jesus then takes it one step further with the second parable that he shares. In it, he says that when you give a luncheon or a dinner, don't invite all your friends or your relatives, but invite those who are out there on the fringes of society, the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Now, I believe Jesus is all for good Christian fellowship, dinner amongst friends, social gatherings, Oktoberfest at the church, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, my guess is that he encourages this kind of behavior. But the point he's trying to make has to do with service. Which type of meal is going to go further in terms of service in God's kingdom? Next Sunday at House of Prayer, our youth will be assembling 250 sack lunches that will be donated to Kids Meals, an organization that supports underprivileged youth right here in the Houston area. While our youth will never meet the beneficiaries of the service project, I would be willing to bet that the beneficiaries are overwhelmed with gratitude when they receive our donations. They truly appreciate the gestures of compassion and love that are intertwined with their meals. Now, how might this be different from a meal shared with friends? Well, when you invite friends over for dinner, they most likely, at the end of the meal, will say this: "Hey, let's do this again, but next time, why don't you come over to my house?" When sharing a meal through Kids Meals, we know that the recipients, they aren't going to try to repay us with dinner or any other token of appreciation. And this is the difference. The meal with friends is conducted out of a love that many times is reciprocated. The meal with the disenfranchised is done humbly out of the love of Christ for fellow children of God, with absolutely no favors expected in return. In the conclusion to the letter of the Hebrews, we hear the following words: "Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God." This is the formula we follow as disciples of Jesus. By placing others in front of ourselves, we humbly say, "Hey, come here, have my seat. I've got your back. I'm going to do what I can to help meet your needs." We mimic the gracious hospitality that epitomized Jesus' entire ministry, a ministry that was fulfilled when he so unselfishly sacrificed himself on the cross for all humanity, with nothing expected in return. Our faith journey begins with us standing in the shadow of the cross. It continues as we extend God's unconditional love to the ones who are in need of it the most. And it ends with us at the doors of God's great banquet hall. So humble yourself in the sight of the Lord by choosing to walk in the footsteps of Christ. For generous giving does indeed result in abundant living. Amen. Remember as you go about your day that yesterday is gone. Tomorrow does not yet belong to you. So why not live today, knowing that you never walk alone? We'll see y'all next week. Later.